Have you ever found yourself asking, what is the meaning of life? It's one of the oldest and most profound questions we can ask ourselves. Philosophers, religious leaders, scientists, and thinkers have spent centuries attempting to answer it. But what if the answer isn't as simple as we've been led to believe? What if the true meaning of life isn't something we can find in a single definitive answer, but something we have to experience for ourselves through our struggles, doubts, and contradictions? Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the greatest writers of all time, explored this very question with remarkable depth and insight. Born into a life filled with hardship, poverty, imprisonment, and loss, Dostoevsky faced the darker sides of the human experience firsthand. Yet, rather than succumbing to despair, he used his suffering to fuel his exploration of some of the most fundamental questions of existence. What does it mean to live authentically? What is the role of suffering in our lives? Can we find redemption in the midst of our darkest moments? In today's video, we're going to explore Dostoevsky's legacy, diving deep into the philosophical insights that run through his greatest works, including Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, and Notes from Underground. We'll look at how these works challenge us to confront our flaws, embrace contradictions, and embark on our own personal journeys towards self-discovery. But here's the twist. Dostoevsky didn't believe in easy answers. His work forces us to reflect on the complexities of our own lives. It asks us to look deep within ourselves and confront uncomfortable truths about who we are and who we want to become. Dostoevsky believed that the meaning of life isn't found in escaping our pain or avoiding difficult questions. It's in embracing them, understanding them, and growing through them. So, as we dive into the depths of Dostoevsky's ideas, prepare to question everything you thought you knew about life, suffering, redemption, and freedom. If you're ready to embark on a journey of introspection, personal growth, and intellectual exploration, then this video is for you. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends. Let's bring more people into the conversation about these life-changing ideas. And if you're feeling generous and want to show some extra love, don't forget to donate a super thank. It helps support the channel, so I can continue creating deep, thoughtful content just like this. Now, let's begin our journey into the world of Dostoevsky and discover the profound truths he left us. Are you ready to explore the meaning of life? For centuries, humans have been pondering the same profound question. What is the meaning of life? Across different cultures, religions, philosophies, and individual experiences, this question has surfaced time and time again, with countless answers offered. Yet no single answer can ever seem to suffice. Is life something we must accept as a mystery? Or is it something that can be decoded and understood, like solving a riddle? These musings about existence are what led great thinkers to explore the human condition, often through stories and philosophies that spoke not just to the mind, but to the heart of what it means to be alive. Among the towering figures who dedicated their lives to this quest for meaning was Fyodor Dostoevsky, a Russian novelist whose works delved deep into the core of human existence, exploring themes of suffering, freedom, morality, and redemption. His writing doesn't merely entertain or narrate stories. It brings us into the darkest, most intimate corners of the human soul, forcing us to confront ourselves, our desires, our contradictions, and our deepest fears. Dostoevsky's works are not simply fiction. They are reflections of the struggle for meaning in a world that often seems devoid of it. In his major works, Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment, and The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky explores human suffering, the nature of evil, the concept of free will, and the redemption that is possible through accepting our faults. These novels are much more than complex stories. They are a profound commentary on the essence of being human. Each one of these works offers a different lens through which to view the same eternal questions, and each is a key to understanding Dostoevsky's unique vision of life's meaning. Take Notes from Underground, for example. Written in 1864, It is often hailed as one of the first true psychological novels. The protagonist, an unnamed man living in a dank, isolated underground space, spends his time philosophizing about the world around him. He is disconnected from society, filled with disdain for the people he believes live superficial lives. But what makes this work so powerful is the protagonist's self-awareness. He knows he is not just alienated from others. He is alienated from himself. His suffering comes from an inability to reconcile the person he thinks he should be with the person he actually is. His torment is rooted in the very idea of freedom. The idea that to be truly free is to confront the discomfort of existing as oneself, no matter how contradictory or painful that existence may seem. In Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky takes this exploration of human suffering and moral failure to an entirely new level. The protagonist, Rodion Raskolnikov, is a young student who believes that he is above the moral constraints that bind ordinary people. He theorizes that certain extraordinary individuals have the right to commit immoral acts in the pursuit of a higher goal, a theory he tests by murdering 2 women. The novel follows his spiraling descent into guilt, madness, and eventual redemption. It is a deep examination of the nature of guilt and the possibility of redemption, showing that even those who have committed the most heinous acts can find meaning and peace through suffering and contrition. What makes Crime and Punishment so impactful is that it challenges us to consider the very nature of morality and justice. The novel suggests that redemption doesn't come through intellectual reasoning or excusing one's actions, but through accepting responsibility and suffering for those actions. Raskolnikov's journey is one of realizing that the meaning of life is not found in intellectual superiority or the assertion of power, but in the capacity to feel guilt, seek redemption, and ultimately find a way back to others. Then, there's the Brothers Karamazov, perhaps Dostoevsky's most ambitious work, published in 1880. In this novel, the Karamazov family, represented by the 3 brothers, Dmitri, Ivan, and Alyosha, embodies the contrasting elements of passion, reason, and faith. Dmitri, the eldest, is ruled by his passions. Ivan, the intellectual, is skeptical and governed by reason. Alyosha, the youngest, embodies faith and spirituality. Through these brothers, Dostoevsky explores the conflict between these forces within the human soul, showing that the search for meaning in life is not a smooth path, but one marked by conflict, struggle, and reconciliation. Each brother's journey reflects a different approach to understanding life's meaning. Dmitri's journey is one of self-destructive passion. Ivan's is an intellectual search for truth that leads to despair, and Alyosha's is a spiritual quest for peace in the face of suffering. Through their stories, Dostoevsky shows that life is not about finding a single, clear-cut answer. Rather, it is about navigating the tensions between the different forces that shape our experience: reason, faith, and passion. The meaning of life is not to be found in any one of these alone, but in how we balance and engage with them, how we learn to live with our contradictions and our internal conflicts. Dostoevsky's view of life is rooted in the belief that suffering is an essential part of the human experience. In fact, suffering itself may be the path to meaning. The idea that pain, in its various forms, is inextricably tied to our growth and our understanding of ourselves and the world around us is a central theme throughout his works. For Dostoevsky, to live a meaningful life is not to avoid suffering, but to find meaning within it. His characters don't run away from their pain. They confront it head-on, and in doing so, they discover something profound about themselves and about the world. Through these 3 novels, Dostoevsky invites us to reflect on some of life's most profound and difficult questions. What does it mean to be free? What is the nature of guilt, and can it ever be overcome? What role does suffering play in our search for meaning? Dostoevsky's exploration of these questions is not just theoretical. It is deeply personal, shaped by his own experiences of suffering, imprisonment, and exile. His philosophy suggests that it is in the confrontation with our darkest fears and deepest pains that we can discover who we truly are and what life is really about. In Notes from Underground, the protagonist's realization of his own alienation forces him to ask what it means to be truly free. The novel suggests that freedom is not just about having choices, but about accepting the complexities of existence, even when those choices lead us into discomfort or contradictions. Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment finds that his theory of being above moral law crumbles under the weight of his guilt. It is through his suffering and eventual acceptance of responsibility that he begins to find meaning in his life. The Karamazov brothers, each grappling with their own form of inner turmoil, show us that life is not about finding a singular answer to the question of meaning, but about learning to navigate the tensions between reason, passion, and faith. In each of these works, Dostoevsky paints a complex, sometimes uncomfortable picture of the human experience. His exploration of human nature is unflinching, showing us our capacity for cruelty, self-deception, and despair, but also our potential for redemption, compassion, and growth. His philosophy is one that acknowledges the darkness within us, while also offering the possibility of finding meaning in that darkness. Dostoevsky's legacy is not just in his ability to tell compelling stories, but in his unwavering commitment to exploring the deepest questions of human existence. His works continue to resonate with readers today because they speak to the universal struggles we all face: the search for meaning, the confrontation with suffering, and the need for redemption. Whether through the isolated, self-loathing protagonist of Notes from Underground, the guilt-ridden murderer of Crime and Punishment, or the conflicted brothers of the Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky shows us that the meaning of life is not a fixed destination, but a journey, one filled with contradictions, suffering, and moments of profound clarity. In the end, Dostoevsky suggests that the meaning of life is not found in external achievements or intellectual triumphs, but in how we face the challenges of existence, how we confront our own darkness, and how we seek redemption in a world that is often harsh and unforgiving. His works remind us that to live authentically is to live in full awareness of the complexities and contradictions of being human. And in that authenticity, we may just find the meaning we've been searching for all along. Fyodor Dostoevsky was born in 1821 in Moscow, Russia, into a family that, while not impoverished, was far from wealthy. His father was a military doctor, and his mother came from a well-off background. Early on, Dostoevsky showed an interest in literature and philosophy, which would later define his life's work. As a child, he was deeply introspective, often absorbed in books that explored complex human emotions and ethical dilemmas. His passion for philosophy and literature set the foundation for the man. He would become a thinker who grappled with life's most profound and difficult questions. At first, however, Dostoevsky's life took a different direction. Instead of immediately pursuing writing, he enrolled in the St. Petersburg Military Engineering Academy, following his father's suggestion that he should pursue a more stable and respectable career. This path would ultimately be short-lived, as Dostoevsky soon found himself disillusioned with the rigidity and monotony of military life. His heart was elsewhere, drawn to the world of literature, where he could explore the vast complexities of the human spirit. In 1846, he published his first novel, Poor Folk, which received critical acclaim and marked the beginning of what seemed to be a promising literary career. At the time, it seemed as though Dostoevsky's future was secure within the realm of Russian letters, poised to join the ranks of the country's great authors. However, it was in 1849 that Dostoevsky's life would take a dramatic turn. His involvement with a revolutionary group, known as the Petrashevsky Circle, would change everything. This group, composed of intellectuals and social reformers, openly criticized the Tsarist regime and advocated for the rights of the oppressed. While the group's discussions and actions were primarily ideological, they ran afoul of the Tsar's secret police, who were determined to root out any dissent against the monarchy. The group's members were arrested, and Dostoevsky, who had become part of their circle, was accused of conspiring against the government. His fate, like that of the others, seemed sealed. The authorities sentenced Dostoevsky to death by firing squad, a verdict that seemed inevitable. On the morning of his execution, he was led out into the cold, desolate Russian winter, his hands bound, awaiting the final moment. This was to be the end of his life, and he faced it with a mixture of terror and resignation. However, in an almost surreal twist of fate, just as he and the other prisoners were about to be executed, a messenger arrived with an imperial pardon, sparing their lives. But this reprieve came with a price. Instead of execution, Dostoevsky was sentenced to a brutal 4 years of hard labor in Siberia, followed by several years of military service. This dramatic shift from the certainty of death to the hellish conditions of a Siberian prison camp profoundly impacted him. It was this experience, this moment of ultimate suffering, that reshaped his entire worldview. The life-changing nature of this experience cannot be overstated. Before his arrest, Dostoevsky was still a relatively young man, just beginning to understand the complexities of the human condition. His early works reflected an idealistic view of life, full of romanticism and intellectual optimism. But his time in Siberia exposed him to the darkest sides of humanity's suffering, cruelty, and the stark realities of human existence. Surrounded by the brutal conditions of the prison camp, where inmates were subjected to starvation, harsh physical labor, and psychological abuse, Dostoevsky was forced to confront the fragility of life and the depths of human despair. This environment, which stripped away all pretensions of intellectualism or romanticism, revealed to him the raw, unfiltered essence of human survival. Suffering, as it turned out, would become one of the central themes in Dostoevsky's later works. The grim reality of life in Siberia forced him to reflect on what it meant to be human in the face of suffering. It was during this time that he began to question the nature of morality, freedom, and the human spirit. While some men succumbed to despair and brutality in the face of such adversity, others, like Dostoevsky, found a kind of clarity in the depths of suffering. He began to understand that life's meaning was not to be found in wealth, fame, or social standing, but in the ability to endure hardship with grace and dignity. He came to believe that suffering could lead to a kind of redemption if one was willing to confront it and endure it. The themes of suffering and survival that Dostoevsky explored in his later works were born out of this personal experience. In works like Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment, and the Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky's characters face intense personal suffering, whether through guilt, mental anguish, or the crushing weight of societal expectations. His exploration of these themes was not abstract or theoretical. It was born out of his own life experiences, particularly his time in Siberia, where he came face to face with the most extreme forms of human suffering. Moreover, the harshness of prison life taught Dostoevsky that human beings are capable of both incredible cruelty and profound compassion. The men around him in the prison camp were a microcosm of humanity in its most basic and unadorned form. He saw firsthand how survival instincts could either degrade a man or elevate him, depending on how he responded to the circumstances. In a way, Dostoevsky's time in Siberia acted as a crucible, a testing ground for his ideas about human nature, suffering, and the possibility of redemption. The intellectual and spiritual transformation that Dostoevsky underwent during his years in exile laid the groundwork for the philosophical and psychological explorations in his later works. He came to believe that true freedom was not the ability to do whatever one wanted, but the ability to endure and make meaningful choices despite suffering. He understood that redemption and personal growth could only be achieved through a confrontation with one's own flaws and limitations. His works, which often feature protagonists grappling with deep personal crises, reflect this belief that the road to meaning and salvation is not a straight or easy one, but one that requires courage, introspection, and an acceptance of life's inherent suffering. Dostoevsky's time in Siberia also marked a spiritual awakening. Before his imprisonment, Dostoevsky was not particularly religious, but the brutality of prison life and the despair he witnessed led him to seek comfort in the Christian faith. His beliefs evolved during this time, and he began to embrace a more profound, personal spirituality. His later works, particularly the Brothers Karamazov, are infused with a deep Christian worldview, one that sees suffering as a path to salvation and spiritual growth. This spiritual transformation became a cornerstone of his later writing, as he began to explore the tension between faith and doubt, grace and sin in his characters. Dostoevsky's years in exile marked the end of his youthful idealism and the beginning of his profound exploration into the complexities of human existence. His personal transformation, forged in the crucible of suffering, would shape the rest of his literary career. His subsequent works, filled with tortured souls and moral dilemmas, reflect the deep psychological and philosophical insights he gained during those years of hardship. The experience of suffering, both personal and collective, became a lens through which Dostoevsky would examine the human condition in all its contradictions, complexities, and potential for redemption. It's difficult to overstate just how profoundly Dostoevsky's Siberian exile impacted his worldview. The harshness of the labor camps, the crushing weight of his sentence, and the constant threat of death shaped his understanding of life in ways that would be impossible to fully capture. But it was this very experience that gave birth to the deep, existential themes that would dominate his works and define his legacy. Through his time in Siberia, Dostoevsky gained a unique perspective on the fragility of life, the nature of suffering. Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, 1864, is one of the most significant and challenging works in world literature. This novella introduces the underground man, a narrator who views himself as both sick and unpleasant, a character whose self-loathing and disillusionment make him seem almost as a creature of another world. It is a work that grapples with the limits of human rationality and free will, providing an unflinching look into the mind of a man who has rejected societal norms and contemplates his existence from the most isolated, bitter, and cynical viewpoint. Through this narrative, Dostoevsky explores the irrational nature of human beings and offers deep insights into the philosophy of freedom, ethics, and identity, creating a character whose emotional struggles reflect universal themes about life's meaning and the human condition. The underground man, who remains unnamed throughout the novel, serves as a manifestation of the anxieties of modern existence. His thoughts are filled with contradictions, and he admits to having no true understanding of himself. As the protagonist reflects on his life, he sees himself as being fundamentally sick, isolated, and unable to function within society. At the heart of Notes from Underground lies a powerful critique of the Enlightenment ideals of rationality and progress. The underground man rejects the optimism of the period, particularly the belief that reason and scientific understanding can guide human behavior and create a better world. Instead, he argues that human beings are not as rational as they like to think. Rather, they often make choices that defy logic, not because they are irrational or mad, but because they are acting out of their fundamental need for freedom. This rejection of reason in favor of self-determined action forms the core of Dostoevsky's exploration in the novella. One of the key elements in the underground man's narrative is his rejection of the idea that humans can be entirely rational beings. His discontent with society stems from his belief that the Enlightenment's vision of human beings as purely rational creatures does not capture the complexity of human nature. He argues that humans often choose to act against their own best interests, and this act of choosing freely even in contradiction to reason, is at the heart of what it means to be human. For the underground man, freedom is not about making rational decisions or acting according to logical principles, but about exercising the power to make choices that are sometimes irrational and even self-destructive. For example, the underground man reflects on how he once had the chance to take revenge on a man who had wronged him, but instead, he chooses not to act on his impulse. He acknowledges that by doing so, he violated his own sense of freedom, because the power to choose a course of action freely, regardless of its consequences, was what gave him a sense of agency. His freedom, in this context, is not a purely rational or ethical decision, but the ability to choose in a way that might contradict what would seem like logical or sensible behavior. In his mind, human beings are so driven by a desire for freedom that they often reject the dictates of reason and act in ways that seem unreasonable. This paradox of human behavior, that we are driven by both rational and irrational forces, is something Dostoevsky explores deeply in the novella. The underground man's narrative also touches upon the complexity of social norms and individual desires. He criticizes society's tendency to impose a uniform standard of rationality and progress, arguing that individuals must have the space to exercise their freedom, even if it results in contradictions. He sees himself as an outsider, someone who cannot fit into the conventional structures of society. And while he despises society for its superficiality and hypocrisy, he also expresses a longing for the very connection that he rejects. There is a sense of deep conflict within him, a recognition that the social order cannot provide him with a meaningful life, yet a simultaneous longing to be a part of it. His existence in the underground represents a rejection of societal expectations, but also a recognition of his own internal struggle. He refuses to conform to the expectations of others, but he is also lonely and disconnected as a result. This brings us to one of the central themes of Notes from Underground: the relationship between freedom and suffering. The underground man is aware that his rejection of social norms has led him into a state of alienation and suffering. Yet, he accepts this suffering as a necessary consequence of his freedom. For him, true freedom is not about living a life of ease or comfort, but about having the power to make choices that are not dictated by the forces of society or reason. In this sense, freedom for the underground man is both a source of great power and great pain. His freedom allows him to reject societal expectations, but also traps him in a state of existential anguish, as he cannot escape the consequences of his choices. Dostoevsky uses the underground man to show that life's meaning cannot be found in rationality or in striving for perfection. In the novel, the underground man's life is a testament to the fact that even when we think we are choosing based on reason or morality, we are often motivated by deeper, more irrational impulses. His decision to isolate himself from the world around him is a direct result of his desire for freedom, but it is also a form of self-punishment. The underground man's suffering is not the result of external forces, but of his own internal contradictions, the tension between his desire for freedom and his inability to live authentically within the constraints of society. This existential tension between the desire for freedom and the limitations imposed by society is central to Dostoevsky's critique of Enlightenment ideals. The underground man's rejection of a rational, deterministic view of human nature reflects Dostoevsky's belief that human beings cannot be reduced to mere products of their environment or logical reasoning. Rather, we are complex beings who live in a state of constant conflict between our rational selves and our irrational impulses. The meaning of life, for Dostoevsky, is found in the ability to embrace this complexity and live authentically, even when it leads to suffering. In a sense, the underground man's inability to reconcile his desire for freedom with the constraints of society serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of intellectualism and rationalism without a deeper understanding of the human spirit. The novella also explores the limitations of free will. While the underground man insists on the importance of freedom, his own life is a stark illustration of how freedom can be a double-edged sword. He is free to make choices, but those choices often lead to isolation, despair, and self-loathing. This paradox is what makes the underground man such a compelling character. His freedom, which he cherishes above all else, is also the source of his misery. The choices he makes, however irrational, are an expression of his desire for freedom, yet they often bring him closer to despair. This raises an important question. If freedom leads to suffering, is it truly worth pursuing? Dostoevsky doesn't offer a clear answer, but he suggests that the true meaning of life may lie not in avoiding suffering, but in finding a way to live authentically despite it. Dostoevsky's exploration of the underground man's suffering offers valuable insights into the human condition. The meaning of life, he suggests, is not found in perfection or rationality, but in the act of living authentically, even when that authenticity contradicts societal expectations or personal rationality. The underground man's life is a series of contradictions. He longs for connection, but rejects it. He desires freedom, but is paralyzed by it. And he yearns for meaning, but finds himself lost in existential despair. Yet, in this very struggle, he embodies the complexity and depth of the human experience. Through his narrative, Dostoevsky shows us that life's meaning cannot be reduced to simple answers or neat conclusions. Instead, it is found in embracing the contradictions and complexities of existence, and in accepting the freedom that comes with living authentically, even when that freedom leads to irrational choices and suffering. In Crime and Punishment, 1866, Fyodor Dostoevsky crafts a deeply psychological narrative centered on Rodion Raskolnikov, a young law student in St. Petersburg who is consumed by the belief that some individuals possess the right to commit immoral acts if they are deemed extraordinary and capable of achieving greater good. Raskolnikov's philosophical theory leads him to justify the murder of two women, Alyona Ivanovna, a pawnbroker, and her half-sister, Lizaveta, an innocent bystander. This act of violence, however, sets into motion a psychological spiral that leads Raskolnikov into profound guilt, madness, and, ultimately, a journey toward redemption. Dostoevsky uses Raskolnikov's internal conflict and moral struggles to examine some of the most fundamental questions of human existence: justice, guilt, and redemption. The novel provides a complex exploration of the human soul and its capacity for both evil and grace. As Raskolnikov wrestles with his crime, he begins to question the very nature of his belief that extraordinary people can break moral laws without consequence. His descent into guilt is not only the unraveling of his mind, but also a deep philosophical exploration into the nature of human suffering and the possibility of salvation through repentance. Raskolnikov's crime is not just a literal murder, but a symbolic act that represents his intellectual rebellion against the conventional moral and social order. He views himself as a Napoleon-like figure, someone who is above the ordinary laws that bind common people. He believes that in order to achieve something greater, perhaps to change the world, he must be willing to make sacrifices, including the murder of those he deems insignificant. However, this rationalization is rooted in an intellectual arrogance that Dostoevsky critiques through the character's inevitable moral breakdown. The novel's power lies in the way Dostoevsky contrasts Raskolnikov's intellectual justifications with the emotional and spiritual consequences of his actions. Though Raskolnikov initially believes he has committed the murder for a higher purpose, he soon finds himself overwhelmed by guilt and paranoia. His thoughts become fragmented, and he is tortured by the belief that he will inevitably be caught, not because of his crime, but because of his inability to reconcile his intellectual superiority with his actions. Raskolnikov begins to experience intense psychological turmoil, a state where his rational mind and emotional conscience are in constant conflict. Dostoevsky masterfully illustrates the collapse of Raskolnikov's philosophical worldview as the weight of his crime sinks in. The guilt he experiences is not simply the fear of punishment, but the deeper realization that he has violated the very essence of humanity. His intellectual arrogance, which initially allowed him to believe in his moral superiority, is shattered by the deep emotional anguish that follows the murder. This breakdown is highlighted by his interactions with others. His cold, distant demeanor is contrasted with the warmth and compassion of characters like Sonia, a prostitute who becomes a source of moral guidance and salvation for him. Through Sonia, Raskolnikov begins to understand that true greatness is not found in intellectual brilliance or moral superiority, but in the ability to acknowledge one's mistakes and seek forgiveness. Sonia's role in Raskolnikov's journey toward redemption is crucial. She represents the Christian ideal of suffering and self-sacrifice, a figure who, despite her own tragic circumstances, offers compassion and love to others. Sonia's unwavering support for Raskolnikov, even after learning of his crime, becomes a key element in his psychological and spiritual transformation. Through her, Dostoevsky presents the idea that redemption is possible through suffering, and that it is only by confronting and accepting one's guilt that true healing can occur. Sonia's presence challenges Raskolnikov's pride, showing him that humility and contrition are necessary for redemption. The moral and philosophical core of Crime and Punishment revolves around the idea that the path to redemption lies not in intellectual justification or moral superiority, but in the willingness to sue, fear, and atone for one's sins. Raskolnikov's initial belief that he can transcend morality and justify his crime is ultimately revealed as a destructive illusion. His journey is a painful one, filled with moments of self-doubt, paranoia, and emotional despair. Yet, it is through this suffering that Raskolnikov begins to find a path to spiritual and moral reconciliation. In the novel, Dostoevsky explores the nature of guilt and its power to shape the human soul. Guilt is not just a psychological burden, but a moral force that can lead to either self-destruction or transformation. For Raskolnikov, the weight of his crime becomes unbearable, and it is only when he confronts his guilt head-on, through the support of Sonia and the spiritual guidance she offers, that he begins to accept the possibility of redemption. This acceptance of guilt is not an easy or quick process. Raskolnikov's journey toward redemption is marked by deep emotional and spiritual conflict. However, the novel ultimately suggests that through suffering and repentance, even the most morally flawed individuals can find a path to salvation. Dostoevsky uses Raskolnikov's inner turmoil to demonstrate that moral greatness is not about achieving intellectual or material success, but about the ability to accept one's flaws and seek forgiveness. Raskolnikov's greatest challenge is not the crime he has committed, but his unwillingness to acknowledge the moral consequences of his actions. His intellectual pride prevents him from seeing the deeper truth that his theory about exceptional individuals is fundamentally flawed. It is only when he embraces his humanity through suffering, guilt, and the love of others that he begins to understand the true meaning of life and the possibility of redemption. Raskolnikov's eventual confession and acceptance of his guilt represent the beginning of his spiritual renewal. His journey from intellectual arrogance to humility is a process of self-realization that mirrors Dostoevsky's belief in the transformative power of suffering. For Dostoevsky, the meaning of life is not found in the pursuit of power, intellectual achievement, or personal success. Instead, it lies in the capacity for self-examination, repentance, and the willingness to confront one's mistakes. Raskolnikov's transformation is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments of our lives, there is the potential for redemption. The novel's resolution emphasizes the importance of reconciliation and the role of human compassion in the process of healing. While Raskolnikov's intellectual arrogance initially led him to commit a terrible crime, it is through the love and support of others, particularly Sonia, that he is able to move toward redemption. His story suggests that every mistake, no matter how grave, can become an opportunity for transformation. Through suffering and self-reflection, individuals can learn to acknowledge their flaws, seek forgiveness, and ultimately find peace. The meaning of life, as Crime and Punishment teaches us, is not found in the pursuit of power or the accumulation of wealth, but in the courage to face our own mistakes and seek reconciliation with ourselves and others. Raskolnikov's journey from crime to punishment to redemption mirrors the existential struggle that all individuals face. The need to confront our flaws, accept our suffering, and make amends for the wrongs we have committed. In the end, it is through this process of moral and spiritual growth that we find meaning in our lives. Dostoevsky's novel illustrates that redemption is not just about atoning for sins, but about the deep, transformative understanding that comes from confronting our own humanity. In Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, 1880, one of his most monumental works, the story of four brothers Dmitri, Ivan, Alyosha, and Smerdyakov unfolds within the context of family drama, spiritual conflict, and philosophical inquiry. Set against the backdrop of 19th century Russian society, the novel explores themes of faith, reason, passion, and the human condition, all while diving into the complexities of moral and existential questions that resonate with readers long after its publication. Each of the four brothers represents a distinct philosophical or emotional perspective, which serves as a lens through which Dostoevsky explores the tensions inherent in human existence. Dmitri, the eldest, symbolizes passion. He is driven by his emotions, desires, and impulsive actions. Ivan, the second brother, represents reason. His intellectualism and skepticism position him as the rational figure who challenges traditional beliefs, particularly in religion. Alyosha, the third brother, stands for faith. He is a deeply spiritual individual, committed to the teachings of Christ and the Orthodox Church. Finally, Smerdyakov, the youngest, embodies hatred, a complex character who reflects the darker, nihilistic side of human nature. The brothers' contrasting personalities and philosophies create a framework for Dostoevsky's exploration of some of the most pressing philosophical questions of the time, particularly the tensions between faith and reason, the nature of good and evil, and the search for meaning in a world fraught with suffering and moral ambiguity. The central philosophical tension in The Brothers Karamazov is the conflict between faith and reason, a theme that echoes through much of Dostoevsky's work. Ivan, the intellectual and atheist, challenges the very idea of God and questions the existence of divine justice in a world that seems rife with suffering. He is particularly troubled by the problem of evil, asking how a benevolent and omnipotent God can allow the innocent to suffer. His famous rebellion against God, as he expresses it, is rooted in his belief that no matter how much good may come from faith and religious belief, the pain and suffering of innocent children make it impossible for him to reconcile the idea of a just and loving God. In contrast to Ivan's skepticism stands Alyosha, who embodies the deep faith and love that Ivan finds impossible to accept. Alyosha's character is a reflection of Dostoevsky's own religious beliefs, and he represents the possibility of spiritual redemption, the idea that faith is not only a source of comfort, but also a source of strength in the face of suffering. Alyosha's life is defined by his commitment to the teachings of Christ, and his role in the novel is to represent the power of love and compassion. Even in a world filled with contradictions and suffering, Alyosha's faith is not intellectual. It is visceral and deeply felt, providing him with the strength to navigate the trials and tribulations that arise throughout the novel. Dmitri, the passionate and impulsive brother, is torn between his emotional desires and his growing sense of guilt over his actions. He is a man of extremes, experiencing intense love and jealousy, but also a deep sense of moral conflict as he struggles to reconcile his personal desires with his understanding of right and wrong. Dmitri's passionate nature makes him a figure of action, but his inability to find balance between his desires and moral obligations leads him into destructive behavior. His character reflects the consequences of living a life driven solely by passion and impulse, without the tempering influence of reason or faith. Smerdyakov, the fourth brother, is the most enigmatic of the four. His character embodies the darker, nihilistic aspects of human nature, representing a total rejection of faith, reason, and passion in favor of an existential void. Smerdyakov's motivations are tied to a profound sense of resentment and hatred, not only toward his father, but also toward the very concept of morality. His nihilism drives him to commit the ultimate act of violence in the novel Parasite. Smerdyakov's actions and motivations raise important questions about the nature of evil and the moral implications of rejecting all philosophical systems. His lack of faith and his inability to embrace either reason or passion make him an embodiment of the destruction that can result from a total rejection of meaning. The tensions between these four brothers' faith, reason, passion, and hatred serve as a microcosm of the larger philosophical and existential struggles faced by individuals in the world. Dostoevsky does not present these perspectives as mutually exclusive, nor does he suggest that one is superior to the others. Rather, he presents them as necessary parts of the human experience, each contributing to the complexity of existence. The conflict between these opposing forces, faith and reason, passion and logic, defines the human condition and forces individuals to confront the contradictions that exist within themselves. Through the characters of the Karamazov brothers, Dostoevsky explores the idea that the meaning of life is not found in resolving these contradictions, but in navigating them. The human experience is defined by internal conflict, and it is through this struggle that we grow and learn about ourselves. For instance, Ivan's intellectual rejection of faith and his insistence on reason as the only valid way to understand the world leads him to despair, as he is unable to reconcile the existence of suffering with his belief in a just and loving God. His rebellion against God, though rooted in intellectualism, becomes a source of deep personal anguish. Ivan's refusal to accept the possibility of faith leads him to spiritual and emotional isolation, as he is unable to find solace in a world that appears arbitrary and cruel. Alyosha, on the other hand, represents the potential for spiritual redemption in the face of suffering. His faith allows him to find meaning in a world that does not always make sense. However, Alyosha's character is not without conflict. He must navigate his own doubts and insecurities, and his journey towards spiritual maturity is marked by moments of crisis and uncertainty. His struggles reflect Dostoevsky's belief that faith is not a simple or static condition, but a dynamic and evolving force that requires constant engagement with the world and its challenges. Dmitri's character, torn between passion and guilt, also represents the complexity of a human condition. His internal battle reveals the consequences of living a life dominated by unchecked desires and impulses. Dmitri's eventual redemption, which comes through his suffering and his willingness to confront the darker aspects of his nature, suggests that personal growth can be achieved through the reconciliation of opposing forces within the self. His journey towards self-understanding is a painful one, but it is through this suffering that he is able to achieve a sense of moral clarity and redemption. Smerdyakov's nihilism, on the other hand, represents the ultimate rejection of both faith and reason. His character serves as a warning about the dangers of living a life without meaning or purpose, a life that denies the value of both intellectual inquiry and spiritual belief. Smerdyakov's actions, culminating in the murder of his father, illustrate the destructive potential of nihilism and the absence of moral grounding. His tragic end underscores Dostoevsky's belief that the rejection of both faith and reason leads to self-destruction. The novel's resolution offers no easy answers to the philosophical questions it raises. Instead, Dostoevsky suggests that the search for meaning in life is a complex and ongoing process, one that requires individuals to engage with the contradictions and tensions within themselves. The brothers' individual journeys toward understanding and redemption highlight the importance of balance in the human experience. Faith, reason, passion, and hatred are not easily reconciled, but it is through engaging with these forces that we are able to grow and develop as individuals. Ultimately, the Brothers Karamazov teaches that the human condition is defined by internal conflict, and that personal development comes from navigating the complexities of existence. The balance between faith and reason, passion and logic, is crucial for achieving a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Dostoevsky's characters show that life's meaning is not found in the resolution of contradictions, but in the willingness to engage with them and to confront the tensions that shape our lives. Through the brothers' journeys, Dostoevsky emphasizes that it is through this engagement with life's complexities that we can truly understand the depth of the human experience. Dostoevsky's life and works represent a profound exploration of the human experience, marked by intense personal suffering, intellectual struggle, and spiritual growth. His experiences of poverty, illness, imprisonment, and the loss of loved ones shaped his philosophical and literary outlook, giving him a deep understanding of human nature and its complexities. These experiences are woven throughout his works, providing a unique lens through which he interrogates the nature of existence, suffering, morality, and redemption. Despite the immense personal hardships Dostoevsky faced, his ability to channel these struggles into his writing has made his works some of the most influential in the history of literature. Dostoevsky's philosophical insights, particularly on the nature of suffering, redemption, and the quest for meaning, continue to resonate with readers and thinkers across generations. His works are not just products of their time, but remain universally relevant, addressing questions that are as timely now as they were in the 19th century. What makes Dostoevsky's legacy so enduring is not just his ability to dissect the human condition, but his exploration of its contradictions. In works like Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, and Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky challenges us to confront the complexities of life head-on, to wrestle with our darkest impulses, and to seek redemption not in perfection, but in the acceptance of our flaws and the effort to grow beyond them. One of Dostoevsky's key contributions to philosophy and literature is his rejection of easy answers. In a world that often seeks simplistic solutions to complex problems, Dostoevsky offers a counter-narrative. The search for meaning is not about finding a singular, definitive answer, but about embracing the complexities and contradictions that define the human experience. His characters do not neatly resolve their moral dilemmas or find clear paths to happiness. Instead, they grapple with their own flaws, their own weaknesses, and the harsh realities of the world. This is where the true value of Dostoevsky's work lies, not in providing answers, but in encouraging readers to ask the right questions, to examine their own lives, and to confront the uncomfortable truths that define the human experience. Dostoevsky's works challenge us to live authentically and to confront our flaws head-on. This is especially significant in today's world, where so many people are searching for quick fixes, fast solutions, and simple answers to complex problems. In an era dominated by consumerism, instant gratification, and the pursuit of external validation, Dostoevsky's exploration of the internal journey of suffering, freedom, and redemption serves as a powerful reminder that true meaning is found not in external achievements or material success, but in the inner work we do to understand ourselves and the world around us. His characters, often tormented by their own guilt, desires, and moral struggles, are ultimately striving for something more profound than fleeting pleasure or worldly success. They are searching for an authentic way to live, to understand their place in the world, and to find peace within themselves. Consider, for example, The journey of Raskolnikov in crime and punishment. His intellectual arrogance and belief in his own moral superiority lead him to commit a horrific crime. Yet it is through his suffering, his confrontation with his own guilt, and his eventual acceptance of his need for redemption that he begins to understand the true meaning of life. Raskolnikov's journey is not one of outward success or material achievement, but of inner growth and moral awakening. It is only when he confronts his own darkness, his own capacity for evil, that he begins to find a path toward redemption. Dostoevsky's message is clear. True greatness is not found in power or intellectual triumphs, but in the ability to face one's own flaws and seek reconciliation. Similarly, in the Brothers Karamazov, the characters represent the different facets of the human condition: passion, reason, faith, and nihilism. Through their struggles, Dostoevsky explores the tension between these opposing forces, suggesting that the meaning of life is not to be found in resolving these contradictions, but in navigating them. Ivan's rejection of faith, Dmitri's emotional turmoil, Alyosha's commitment to spiritual love, and Smerdyakov's nihilism all reflect the complexities of the human experience. And it is through their engagement with these complexities that they come to understand themselves and the world around them. Dostoevsky doesn't offer simple solutions, but shows that life's meaning is found in the process of grappling with these contradictions and finding ways to move forward in the face of them. Dostoevsky's exploration of suffering is another key aspect of his legacy. In many ways, his work suggests that suffering is an inevitable and essential part of the human condition. Far from being something to be avoided, suffering is something to be understood, embraced, and even transcended. The characters in his novels, from Raskolnikov to Alyosha, experience suffering in different ways. It is often through suffering that they come to a deeper understanding of themselves and the world. This idea of redemption through suffering is central to Dostoevsky's worldview, and it challenges us to reconsider our relationship with pain and difficulty. In a society that often prioritizes comfort and happiness above all else, Dostoevsky's insistence that suffering can lead to moral and spiritual growth offers a powerful alternative perspective. However, Dostoevsky's message is not one of passive resignation to suffering. Instead, it is a call to actively engage with our struggles, to confront the darkness within ourselves, and to seek meaning in the midst of adversity. His characters are not passive victims of fate, but active participants in their own redemption. In Notes from Underground, for example, the underground man's suffering is not something that simply happens to him. It is a product of his own choices, his own inability to reconcile his intellectual arrogance with his deep existential loneliness. His path to self-understanding is marked by a painful confrontation with his own contradictions. And it is only through this process that he begins to move towards some form of redemption. The meaning of life, according to Dostoevsky, is not a destination, but a continuous journey, a quest that unfolds through contradictions, suffering, redemption, and self-discovery. Life's meaning is not something that can be neatly packaged or easily understood, but something that must be lived and experienced. We must embrace the complexity of existence, seek balance, and grow through our experiences. Dostoevsky suggests that it is only through our engagement with life's challenges, our intellectual struggles, our moral dilemmas, our moments of despair, that we can come to understand what it means to live authentically. In today's world, where many people are searching for quick answers and easy solutions, Dostoevsky's works provide a counterpoint. They challenge us to reflect on our own lives and question the assumptions we hold about happiness, success, and meaning. Rather than offering simplistic answers, Dostoevsky invites us to embark on our own search for meaning, to embrace the contradictions within ourselves, and to find meaning in the journey rather than the destination. As readers, we are encouraged to reflect on our own search for meaning in life and to engage with the philosophical questions that Dostoevsky poses. In doing so, we can begin to understand the complexities of the human condition and appreciate the depth of his insights. Dostoevsky's exploration of suffering, freedom, redemption, and the search for truth remains as relevant today as it was in his time, and it continues to offer profound insights into the nature of existence. For those who have not yet read his works, there is no better time than now to delve into Dostoevsky's philosophy and examine the questions he raises about life, morality, and the human soul. Whether through Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, or Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky's novels offer a profound exploration of the complexities of human life, and they challenge us to live more authentically, to confront our flaws, and to seek redemption not in external achievements, but in the deeper, more difficult work of self-discovery. The search for meaning is not an easy one, but it is a journey worth undertaking. Wow, what a journey we've just been on. Dostoevsky's works challenge us to confront the full spectrum of human experience, our joys, our sorrows, our flaws, and our potential for redemption. His exploration of suffering, freedom, and moral growth shows us that life's meaning isn't a fixed, easy-to-find destination. It's a complex, continuous quest that unfolds through contradictions, struggles, and self-discovery. As we explored his life and ideas, we learned that true meaning isn't found in external achievements or material success. It's in the courage to face our inner contradictions, embrace suffering, and seek redemption through introspection and self-awareness. Dostoevsky's characters may struggle, suffer, and fail, but it's through their suffering that they ultimately find their path to understanding themselves and their place in the world. So what about you? What is your search for meaning? Are you navigating the complexities of existence with courage and authenticity? Or are you avoiding the tough questions and settling for easy answers? Remember, as Dostoevsky showed us, life's meaning is found not in resolution, but in the willingness to engage with life's toughest questions. I encourage you to dive deeper into Dostoevsky's works Crime and Punishment. The Brothers Karamazov and Notes from Underground are just the beginning. They will make you think, challenge your beliefs, and maybe even change your life. If you enjoyed this video and found it thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might appreciate these deep ideas. And if you want to support the channel further, consider donating a super thank. Your support helps keep these kinds of discussions alive and accessible to more people. Finally, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share your thoughts on Dostoevsky's ideas. Do you agree with his view of life, suffering, and redemption? How has your own search for meaning shaped your life? Let's keep the conversation going, because the search for meaning is never over. It's a continuous journey we all share. Thank you for joining me today. Keep questioning, keep searching, and never stop growing. See you in the next video.